you like the other skirt with the righteous queen. She living right mind tight, keep it sexy. I be's the righteous dude with a good heart. So quality, respect you from the very start. First ever good time. See, that's a peak game. Being comfortable in your skin, score peach fame. Go smell a wildfly, make a deep change. Mentally elevate, seek balance and maintain. The work schedule got you locked into it a little longer. Gotta chill a little sometimes. The pressure's gonna get stronger. All right. You know. But get your mind right and chill. Sky's right with the sunlight plaster. Hit the part just to spark up. Worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Big King S.1 hollering at you one more again. True indeed. Man, I love you all. Thank you. I see folks starting to file in. Man, the form of love. Word life, true indeed. Worldwide movement, peace, love, respect. Man, thank you all for helping me to continue to build the worldwide movement, peace, love, respect. And welcome to episode 3 of Building with Big King. One time. All right, man. So this is, I want to give the same disclaimers, right? The format of the podcast is a little bit different than the previous format on the channel, in that this is all adult content, right? Not that we are seeking out or expect any negativity or anything dark along those lines or anything like that, right? But we are all adults and this is live, right? And we're certainly not going to be policing anyone's speech in this forum. So this is open. This is an open and adult forum. And we're going to be very relaxed here, right? You may see smoking from time to time. Folks, I am an avid marijuana supporter. In fact, I operate from the stance that marijuana should never have been illegal. Let's correct that, but cannabis, right, should never have been illegal in the first place. And Big King, boo to Harry Anslinger and his partner. I always forget that guy's name. For that whole campaign, right, that led to the illegalization of marijuana, cannabis, ganja, whatever name you want to use, folks. Certainly, we know all the millions, well, not the millions, but the myriad of benefits that millions and millions have enjoyed throughout the millennia, right? Different ways that wonderful plant has aided us. All right. So today's subject matter is one that is very, very interesting and one in which I very much want to foster and support everyone's point of view on this, right? In that, for me, and by the way, the subject matter for today is, hey, what's up, Jermaine? What's up, everybody who's chiming in? Thank you so much. I truly love and appreciate you, right? But today's subject matter is in relationships. Do we want to own to someone, be owned by someone, or have someone be owned by us? Or do we want to be involved with someone? And there's certainly a difference. We're going to talk a little bit about that. All right, folks. So many of us have grown up in and are used to traditional relationships, right? Um, and many of us have developed our perception of what relationships should or should not be based on the connotation that society offers to us, right? Um, pardon me. Gotta keep the pipes clean and wet, ready to speak. But true indeed, social engineering plays a very big part in what relationships look like today, right? Um, I myself in have found that in my journey through my spiritual awakening, my ascension process, whatever you want to label it as, have vastly grown in my perception of relationships, right? And what they should or should not look like in terms of my interpretation. Um, Certainly, I would say that I have grown a great deal in my concept of what it is to be a human being, first of all, right? Um, Human beings are these beautiful, magnificent souls that are living in this corporeal reality, this 3D, 4D existence in a physical body, right? Um, I won't get too deep into that because I don't want necessarily to make this a conversation about clash and belief systems of what a human being is. But to me, um, just that in itself is magnificent. What do you mean, Big King? So, as a human being, first of all, you're a soul uh, coming from an existence that did not know any of the demands of physicality, right? So you're born into this physical body and you start to meet all these external needs along with the needs that this physical body, which it in itself, I'm sure for the first few bits of life, right, moments of life at least, has to be somewhat foreign to us as babies, right? So you're getting rushed with all this, and then that rush continues on throughout your life, right? Um, the myriad of situations, circumstances, people, places, and things that influence you, not to mention the layers and layers and layers of indoctrination and the total impact of social engineering, right? That formulates your concept of who and what you are as a person. Um, to go through all of that, right? And then to find your way to some point in life that you feel solid enough in yourself that you can uh, invest now time and energy and into sharing with another human being who's going through that same incredible, magnificent journey. I don't take that lightly, right? To me, each and every person, each and every individual is someone to be honored. You heard me. To be honored and to be looked at lofty heights, right? I look at every human being and see this is another soul that is having a magnificent journey for their human experience. With that being said, it's far more easy for me now, right, to establish and to let flow through me unconditional love, right? truly having that kind of appreciation for the human experience in everyone, male or female, or whatever background or genre we want to split this up into. So all of those things heavily influence what my perception of and what my involvement in a relationship looks like, right? Um, Previously, I too sort of bought into a concept of ownership in relationships, right? This is my woman, right? She belongs to me, and all of the things that go along with that, right? Defending her, um, being willing to be confrontational with, and even assail physically another individual, right? Another male in defense of her, or even to reaction of the thought of coming after mine, right? Sort of the lion mentality, the pride mentality in the lions, right? Um, which is to say animalistic behavior, right? At least no judgment, fellas. I'm just keeping it real. We have to understand what a lot of that macho, right, sort of overly aggressive territorialism about our women uh, really is. That's about ownership, right? When you think of territorialism, you're talking about what you own, right? Defending what you own, what you perceive as owning, and vice versa in women, right? But now I would say that certainly having such a different viewpoint in what that other person actually is and honoring for their human experience, ownership couldn't enter into the picture, right? Um, for me at this point, how could I dare to, right, uh, uh, assert ownership over this magnificent soul's human experience? Huh? Come on now, right? But I've certainly had to grow to that point. Now, I think that with a true honoring of the human experience, and when you bring that into that relationship, along with, and this is probably what might be most key, or most key in terms of what's missing from many relationships, but along with your own completeness. Here's what I mean. I have heard it said in many different forms and by many individuals, um, when describing love, that their mate or their wife or husband or whoever completes them, right? Or how much they need that person. Okay. Now, hear me right. No judgment. And I'm not saying that I look down on that perception, but let's analyze that for what it is. If a human being has gotten to a point in their own spiritual maturity, their own solidification as an individual, right? You attain your own completeness, right? If you are completely alone, you still can sit right with self. And when you bring that to the table, especially in an ideal situation where both individuals bring that to the table, you're now bringing to the table an opportunity to accentuate and complement one another rather than complete one another, because you're already both complete. And you attain that the only way that, in my perception, an individual truly can obtain completeness is from within self, right? And I think that the ownership mentality, along with that, in some people, now again, like I said, there's no judgment in that concept of how much you need one another, right? There are people who've had beautiful 40 and 50-year relationships and marriages that will talk about how much they've needed that person and do need them and have needed them throughout the years. I'm not saying that's wrong, folks. What I'm saying to you is that at whatever point in one's life, that if you're able to bring that level of spiritual maturity to the table where you've attained your own completeness, and rather than needing someone to sort of be that puzzle piece that completes you as a whole person, instead of that, you enter into the relationship as a whole person, right? Then you can complement one another. You can accentuate one another. You can provide an atmosphere for one another to grow rather than become a project of one or the other in trying to complete this individual, right? See, some people are going into relationships to be raised, right? Some people still have, you know, issues that were never worked out in the years that we would assign them to, typically in terms of your growth and maturation from, child, adolescent to adult, and the myriad of coping mechanisms that you develop through that process, right? Some people are lacking in some of those areas and tend to, or have grown accustomed to, finding that in a mate, so to speak, right? Again, more symptoms or more symptomology of going into a relationship needing to be completed by someone else, as opposed to going into the relationship complete and capable of complementing someone else or accentuating someone else, or fostering a real environment for both of you to grow as individuals in a shared experience, right? Um, so I would say again that when you have that honoring of the human experience and that appreciation for the other person in the relationship, there automatically comes a certain level of respect, right? Um, there automatically comes a certain level of trust, right? First of all, if we think about it, folks, just for a moment, with a little bit of spiritual maturity, you should not really, or at least in my perception, you shouldn't be entering into a relationship where you don't have at least a certain flat line of trust, and then the ability to develop a deeper intrinsic trust, right? Um, yeah, if you're going into a relationship with somebody who you don't trust, and there's not even the platform to develop trust from the beginning, why are you going into a relationship with that person, right? Um, is that wise? Um, but yeah, to get back to some of these core factors, um, I think that the ownership mentality, for one, because that can go very deep, folks. When you look at someone as your property, right? First of all, when you look at someone as your property, is the property, you're taking away several layers of what they are, right? You've taken away their respect for their consciousness, respect for their individuality, for their ability and their sovereign right to make their own choices, right? You've taken away their room to differentiate from what you may think or believe about a certain situation, subject, scenario, whatever, right? Um, there are so many ways that you fit that person into your box, right? And we in many relationships we do that to each other. We fit each other into sort of a conceptual box of what we've idealized or envisioned that person to be, or that we generically have for whoever our mate is going to be, that people must find themselves fitting into in order to even have the opportunity to establish a relationship with us, right? Um, I think that when we are able to honor the human experience in another person, and when that is important, when the actual sacredness is important to you, is that important to you, then I think there's just a pathway to the kind of engagement with one another that can really be beautiful, right? Where many of the ills of today's contemporary relationship um, don't exist, right? When you have an ownership mentality sort of lorded over someone else, right, that you're in a relationship with, then you can get to a point where you're smothering that person, right, with always making sure that they're staying in that box that you've constructed for them, and vice versa, right? You can have a situation where one person in the relationship is doing that to the other, or you can have a situation where you're both doing it to each other in different ways, right? Um, Magnificent. Thank you for the commentary, folks. I'm going to be opening this up to Q&A very soon. Try to get that opened up a little sooner than I typically do, because again, in honoring the individual experience of every human being, each individual's perception on this is that much more important and golden to me, right? But yeah, when you're able to honor each other in that way, um, and you stay out of that ownership lane, you stay away from establishing rules and conditions on your love, right? Um, because we know in relationships, realistically, those rules and conditions, um, when one party falls short of the other party's expectations in those situations, unfortunately, we don't have, or we often don't have in this society, the spiritual maturation to just agree and part ways amicably, right? Often we have rocky breakups based on one individual feeling as though the other person broke the rules. You cheated, right? You didn't adhere to the agreement, right? Um, and thus, in order also to maintain moral high ground, often you have people using deceit, right? rather than admit that I've broken the rules, or rather than be caught or called to task about how I've broken our agreement, I'm going to lie. And I'm going to lie and keep that lie until I'm in the dirt. And as far as they know, that's what the truth is. And I'm sticking to it. And for them, and how dare they say I'm lying? You don't know I'm lying. What? And all the silliness that we get into in relationships, right? When we are absent um, that mentality and have respect for one another, um, you respect the other person in the relationship uh, so much that it doesn't come into your psyche as an option to lie, right? Because deception tarnishes and taints your honoring of their experience. Remember, I talked about holding the human experience in that sort of sacredness, right? And your sacredness for that other individual in the relationship doesn't decrease or go away because you're in a relationship with that person. If anything, it should increase because you see them going through on a daily basis the trials and tribulations and all the ish that we got to go through as human beings living this experience. You should that much more so be honoring them and not want to stoop to the level of deceit, right? Um, but also, when you don't have that ownership mentality, you don't make people feel that way, right? Um, you give people the room to make mistakes, and then you simply tell the truth or share the truth with one another and decide on whether or not you'll continue to move forward on your path together, right? In my opinion, that's the spiritually mature thing to do. Um, in my opinion, we are together for a season. How long that season is, or how deep of relationship that season grows into, will likely be dependent upon our ability to determine where we are as individuals having our human experience in a shared environment now, right? With a shared set of circumstances, with a shared set of responses, right? Um, Remember, when you go into the relationship complete, there's an environment to grow. So now you're growing together, right? So I just think that really, you know, the honoring of another person's individual human experience, one, when you come into the relationship is incredibly important. And two, um, going into the relationship with your own level of completeness, I believe is also paramount. And I just wanted to say that in terms of the ownership mentality, and also um, how a person tends to find their completeness in others, those sort of mentalities um, provide the pathway to things like infatuation and obsession, right? Um, because of what the other person in a relationship means to that individual. If you're providing my completeness in life, and depending on the scale of how far that goes to, um, my daily dependency on you will only grow, right? And most of us would recognize that generally, or certainly often, doesn't result in good outcomes in relationships, right? Um, like I said, and also with the ownership mentality, that too leads you down the path of infatuation and obsession. in terms of ownership, right? Your ownership over that person, or vice versa, right? There are some people, and folks, that's often, there's a lot more vice versa relationships than we often might admit too, right? Because it's often the fact that, um, since both of us are putting these ownership parameters on one another, there's a level of justification there or rationalization, right? You know, I own you just as much as you own me, and you own me just as much as I own you, right? Justifying sort of a co-dysfunctionality, um, that again, I think many of us would acknowledge often provides a pathway to unhealthy outcomes, right? Okay, folks, I built enough on those things. I could go on for days and days, just like lyrically, folks, right? But I'm gonna go ahead and open this up, and there's some great comments here in the comment section. I'm gonna just start reading those off, and we'll go back and forth a little bit in that way, since we've had a little bit of difficulty manipulating this um, function of opening it up for Q&A. So, all right. Hey, Heather, Jermaine, Isha, Stu Chris, Stu Chris. Man, everybody who's chimed in, thank you all. I love you. First of all, please know that, right? Okay. Heather states this is truth. This is a great subject. Thank you, Heather. I do think it's a very important subject. Um, we're people, right? And yeah, we're all going through an ascension process, and we're all attempting to gain spiritual maturation and continue forward. Um, but there is the minutia of what it is to be human beings in today's society that we got to swim through, right? So we got to talk about things like this. Certainly important. Thank you, Heather. Isha, love you, baby. Thank you for chiming in. My daughter, folks, chimes in with the statement: ownership mentality has become the unfortunate standard of today's society. Yes, I would you're spot on with that, babe. Spot on. She goes on to say, although I do believe protection is necessary within relationships, whether it's in prevention or defense of your partner's well-being, physically, mentally, or emotionally. Thoughts? Thank you so much. That is an excellent um, statement and posing of a question that we can open up for everybody. I would just say, yeah, I agree 100% with all of that. You know, I love everyone on the planet unconditionally. I've said that, um, time and time again, because it's the truth, right? Um, but in a relationship, right, or even for that matter, just in society in general, we know that there are situations where, unfortunately, those of us who may be struggling with whatever um, don't behave in a safe manner, right? So, upholding the safety and making sure for the physical safety and well-being, or any of those ways, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? Certainly it's important that we do that for each other, that we be there for each other in that way. Spot on, Isha. I just agree completely with that. And if anybody else has thoughts on that, please just jump in the comments, and I'm just going down the comments reading and sort of taking things. All right. Hey, what's up, brother Ty? My man. Brother has been a good friend, and also has been instrumental in aiding me in some developmental things with the channel, right? Um, but yeah, please, I'm a give a moment for anybody to come with any comments on what Isha was saying. I think that she opened it up magnificently for us to give that some thought. And I'm lighting up, folks. Yes, indeed. True indeed. As we keep this a relaxed atmosphere. I was just talking to a good friend of mine, uh, brother S will say, and I hope I wasn't too forthcoming in giving you your nickname, Ish. um, but I'm also, you have that in your comments, so I guess it's all right. But yeah, brother S, we was building and building with Big King. I was talking to him a little bit about what caused me to develop the concept of this podcast and why it's called Building with Big King. So when I was in my late teens, right, sliding into my early 20s, a group of me and my friends used to get together, right, in my partner's room or a couple other different places, right? We would pick a venue sort of on the fly, and we would get together, right, and just in the process of communing with one another, we started turning it into sort of a study session, or it grew into that organically, right? We would get together a lot of times just to smoke, right? And in the natural process that we tend to find ourselves, and I put this in my song, if you listen to it, Vibing High, when we smoking together. Hey, Ma V, what's up, sister? Thank you again for coming in. But I was talking about the development of the concept for the podcast. Yeah, we would get together and just be smoking and passing it back and forth. I talked about how that naturally creates conversation, right? And one of the natural effects of the brethren, sister and brethren, marijuana, ganja, righteous cannabis is that it inspires inquisitive thought, right? Often pathological thought, because you want to get to the root or to the bottom of things. So we would get together and do that, right? Oftentimes we would end up breaking open religious books or kitabs, you could call them. We break open the Bible, or we break open the Quran at a certain point and start studying and getting into the details of a certain subject. And discussing it in great detail with one another, bouncing it off of one another, building, building with one another, right? And that's just a little bit of the concept behind what goes into Building with Big King. That's the name of the forum. Mavi, please chime in, sis. So Isha, the divine daughter, right, came and chimed in with this, and I sort of left it open for everybody. Ownership mentality has become the unfortunate standard of today's society. And she goes on to say, although I do believe protection is necessary within relationships, whether it's in prevention or defense of your partner's well-being, physically, mentally, or emotionally. Thoughts, and I pretty much left that open up for anyone. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, or anybody else's thoughts on that. Please chime in, folks. Just go ahead and throw it right in the comments. But yeah, getting back to commenting on that, the more we appreciate one another, along with the more we go into the relationship with a certain level of completeness, I would say the more we are capable of protecting, defending, nurturing, and providing an environment of growth for ourselves and our partner, physically, mentally, emotionally, and I added spiritually. Um, I think that that is very important, and again goes a long way uh, toward what you're actually coming to the table with as individuals, right? Before you form that union, whatever that looks like. Okay, folks, any more comments? I loved what Isha left out there, and I love to hear somebody else chime in on that. And again, today's subject matter is in relationships. Do we want to belong to someone or have someone belong to us, or do we want to be involved with someone? And I want to chime in. I'm glad I restated that because I want to chime in a little bit more about the second part of that. In that when we do honor someone's uh, journey as a human, and we're coming from that complete standpoint ourselves, I think there is that much more of an inclination, a capacity, and an ability for us to appreciate each other in all of those realms. Um, Certainly, I would say that we can we can provide that opportunity or that environment. I think is a good way of saying it, right? For one another, that we can grow in all those ways, right? Because we are that much more complete and complementing one another, bouncing different things off of one another from different perspectives, right? Or bouncing different perceptions of our shared reality. Remember, you're now having a shared reality with one another, right? So you're both living this reality that you share in all of this myriad of experiences that makes up the collage of your everyday lives, but you both still maintain your own individual perspective that you can bounce off of one another and provide and foster an environment to grow just in that way alone, right? And all of that is very important, and it's beautiful to me when you have that kind of environment, um, and that pure growth being fostered for one another. Um, Let me see what we have here. Mavi, protection for me is about integrity. Okay. She goes on to say, I believe all relationships in their balance are interdependent. True that. True that. Um, Great comment. Again, we have um, something that points to the opportunity we provide for one another, right, to be better. You know, I mean, folks, I think relationships really are um, at their core those opportunities for us to be better. And there are a lot of different kind of relationships in life, right? I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, right? The relationship between a mother and father, the relationship between a mother and daughter, a mother and son, father and daughter, father and son, sister and brother, brother and sister, between friends, cousins, etc. Right? Work associates, people in the neighborhood, right? We have many different types of relationships, and I think all of them represent opportunities for us to grow when we're able and have the capacity to foster that environment. And I think that what Ma V says is powerful in that when we are interdependent on one another, we got each other's back, right? And we're certainly fostering the right environment. And that goes in all things, uh, uh, any of my other brothers that have spent or had some time in the street, or have had some rocky aspects or seasons in your life, you appreciate having that female that's watching your back, that's thorough like that, right? And certainly my sisters have had situations where they may appreciate a man who's not afraid to step up to the plate in defense of his or her woman in a time where that's needed, right? These are practicalities of relationships, but more so the interdependency goes farther than just those physical practicalities. What about the myriad of experiences that individual would have experienced either by themselves or someone else, but they're experiencing those things with you? Tough times, trying times, times that make them question themselves, right? You may have an opportunity or the capacity to provide a light or a way that you see them that they may not even be seeing themselves. And that might be tremendously helpful in those trying times, right? So it's most certainly interdependent, where we are knowing each other deeply enough that we can provide those kind of insights for one another and be there for each other intimately in those types of situations, right? It looks like we have some more from Mavi. Okay. So Mavi goes on to state, I used to believe I could be self-made and have matured to know that I have done and will do nothing without relationships. I've got nothing done without them. LOL. True indeed. And I think that what she just states really touches on like what I was trying to emphasize a moment ago. That there are so many different types of relationships in our lives. That I think what she says is very profound. That what could we really have accomplished in our lives at all if you really, honestly, minus ego, right? And that's folks, before I let this slip my mind, and I'm gonna get back to what Marvie was saying. Ego, ego can be that drop of nitroglycerin in a relationship that if you are going into it with either ownership mentality or that incompleteness, right, that is needy in that way of being completed by the other individual. Ego is that nitroglycerin that explodes and exacerbates everything, like the purest cocaine that you could give someone, right? Or all of that. So, but getting back to what Marvi was saying, certainly if we are honest about ourselves from the beginning of life to today, minus ego, you don't do much. You don't even learn how to walk without the relationship of your mother and father or whoever it was that taught you how to walk. Nor talk if you don't have somebody around you, right? If you surrounded by animals, we see what happens. You don't grow up lingual, right? You grow up in animal utterance. So the point is that whatever it is that we have become, that we are to become, or that we do or accomplish in life, relationships is a part of that, a key part of that, and are that much, and are very important in those ways. Whether it's romantic relationships or some other form, and certainly in romantic relationships, people who have experienced great deals of success in life, what is one of the first things they often do? They turn and give a lot of credit to their partner because of all the things we've described on how we share that journey together, right? But back here, another comment. Um, or what my view said. Oh, not even our existence. LOL. Okay. You just mean specifically like in the relationship platform that we have grown accustomed to. Sure. That is very important that we are interdependent in providing that for ourselves. And that we recognize the things that we've accomplished in our lives, because we've had that other person that we've been in a relationship with, uh, who has supported us in the ways that have enabled us to grow, right? All right. Anybody else with some other comments or different perspectives or views on this subject, or any of the comments that anyone else has posted? I'll give a few more minutes to see if anybody chimes in with that, and if so, we'll respond accordingly. Man, I love to stay hydrated, and I hope that, or at least I'll say for any of you who didn't pick up in my initial uh, episode, the way that I imbue my intentions on my water and marijuana, ganja, cannabis. If you didn't see those practices the way I explained them briefly on the video on that episode, pardon me, there are videos that I have where I go into detail about how I do that. For anyone who's interested, just go on the channel. You can find that. All right. Few more minutes I'll give for anybody else who has any more comments. Either anyone who's commented already or somebody new who has not commented yet, who wants to comment either just on the subject matter or something within the comments that we already have from other people who've chimed in. And thank you all for making this a robust conversation, right? One that I think we have all grown in, right? Just from the relationship we have right here, in the environment we've fostered for each other to grow. All right. Well, look, I don't see any new comments rolling in. So I will put, hold up, boom, bam. Uh, okay, real quick. So Mavi states, I believe I want to be involved with building with another and others and never want to relinquish my agency to anything or anyone. True that. Um, that's powerful as well. Folks, I think that chimes a little bit back into talking about that neediness where you enter into a relationship incomplete and are needing someone else to complete you. When you do that, you unwittingly do most certainly relinquish your agency to that other individual. And that can be a very slippery slope and potentially a dangerous one as well. She continues, agency and our primary relationship with ourselves is priority. I agree 100%. Um, Folks, there's a certain sacredness about our own oneness, right? Um, the Creator expressed us forth as an expression of the Creator's energy that is specific and individual and unique. And that's important to maintain and honor in the way that we live our lives and the relationships that we establish and maintain with others. Brother Jermaine chimes in. Okay, this time, these types of conversations are greatly needed, especially in today's day and times. I think they are very important, right? Um, Folks, in general, relationships, whether we're talking about romantic relationships or not, relationships have really become strained between individuals. And we see that um, spun outwardly into the macrocosm of society and civilization in general on the planet. What do we see right now? Strained relationships in the Middle East, strained relationships in the Ukraine, right? Taken to the extreme to mass loss of life. So yeah, that's very important. And like I said, it can uphold restraint, can take us to extremes. Even in romantic relationships, we have heard tragically about many a romantic relationship that has resulted in loss of life because of the extremes that individuals have gone through with these mentalities compartmentalized within their own relationships, right? But yeah, it's very important in this day and time where we see all these strained relationships, these flawed and dysfunctional relationships that certainly with a little bit more insight, with communication and leaning on one another, right? As we lean on one another in the tribe, I think we can help each other to heal, right? I think that opportunity is there for us to help each other to heal and to grow in our capacity, not only individually but collectively, to have better relationships, right? Um, okay, Marvi, I think, excuse me, I think these convos are very important too. And especially in this season when awareness and perspective around our wellness is most needed. Yeah, I truly agree with that. And that is a excellent aspect of it to highlight, Marvi. Um, how many, or rather, how frequent has it become now that we hear about the need to focus on our wellness, because in general, just to have been alive in these past couple of decades, right, is a trying task, right? The Hopi Indian uh, uh, or Native American, should I say, right? I'm not going to get into to that a whole lot because certainly we're indigenous here. But they have a saying that these are both the most difficult, I'm paraphrasing, the most difficult and glorious times to be alive on the planet right now. Or something like the most trying times and the most beautiful times to be alive on the planet right now. And I agree with that. We've been through a lot. So wellness has become that much more paramount. And that aspect of it individually is important and certainly spins out to us as spins out to the macrocosm. Isha further comments and says, ego deserves its own episode. LOL. Too much ego can have you destroy every relationship around you. I agree. 100%. That is part of the symptomology, I would say, of ego spun out of control, is that you become so myopic and so focused on me and my perspective of things that you completely shut out anyone else's, or not even that you shut it out, you do often shut it out, but you devalue and delegitimize everyone else's point of view because your point of view and your experience has become so paramount in your own perception because of your ego. That can be very toxic in just about every kind of relationship in your life, right? Certainly romantic relationships as well. Yeah, definitely. Excellent thing to chime in with, Isha. Thank you very much. Yeah, that is, I can't accent the importance of that enough, that we understand how powerful our ego is and how much social engineering today is designed to foster our ego to sort of be blown out of control, right? Because it compels and fosters a lot of other things that that those who have the social engineering in place want to see. Like consumerism. When you are constantly feeding your ego, your materialism is likely to tend to explode, right? Yeah, so there are a myriad of things and ways that you are affected by an out of control ego that in turn affects every relationship around you. Excellent point. Mavi goes on to say, yes, it's the ego's role to not acknowledge anyone else in its existence and survival. But that doesn't have to be an issue if it's not leading, but it's informed by our spiritual selves. True that. Now, this is where we talk about the need for balance. Remember, folks, we're always seeking balance. Remember the line in the jam: seek balance and maintain. From one of my jams, Flexible. But yeah, true that. We always need to seek balance, right? And everything that is a part of us has a role. Ego is no exception. We have a use for ego, and there is a role for ego, but we're not operating from our highest consciousness when ego is leading the way, right? When ego is in the driver's seat, we become very myopic and closed off, right? Very one-sided and closed-minded in general. I would say, right? Um, because again, the design of the ego is me, 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 me. That's what ego's designed to be, right? So if that is out of whack, then you are completely closing off um, your 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 acceptance, your openness to anything that you could benefit from the myriad of relationships in your life. Um, all right, excellent, man. Man, y'all pause for a minute and stand up and take a bow or something to pat yourselves on the back, right? Give me a quick high five. If we ain't had a stimulating, uh, growth inspiring, magnificent conversation here tonight. Thank y'all. Truly, I appreciate that. And I love y'all. Um, for making this venue what it is growing into. I'm already seeing it, right? This is growing into a beautiful forum that we're making for ourselves right here, right? So let's keep doing that, man. This is dope. I love it. So I'm gonna give another moment or two and see if anybody else has again either a comment, a statement, question that they want to pose relative to uh, today's subject matter. Do we want to be owned by someone in a relationship, or do we want to own someone in a relationship? Let me state that better. In relationships, do we want to own someone or be owned by someone? Or rather, do we want to be involved with someone? And again, I circle back around to that point. Every time I say that, it really just brightens up in importance. The more we're able to appreciate someone else's human experience, right? That other person that we're in a relationship with. And the more that we're doing so from our own platform of completeness, then the more we have that opportunity uh, 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 for us to grow and to really be involved with that person's experience. I mean, already as it is, our experience is magnificent, right? And then to really be at a place in our relationship where we can be involved with one another, as opposed to, um, you know, the limitations and the box that we sort of fit someone into when we feel like we own them, or vice versa if we're owned by them. um, I think the difference is night and day, and the opportunity for growth and for a beautiful expansive relationship between two people, um, or more for that matter, no judgment, peace, love, respect, um, is is magnificent, right? I really believe that, you know, to be in that kind of a relationship and to share this human experience with one another where you're actually involved in one another's experience, and you now have, see, when you're involved in that way, in my opinion, you're not taking away anything from the other person. You're not limiting them in any way, and you're not fitting them into any constriction, right? So they're continuing to grow and fully express in their human experience, and you're continuing to grow and fully express in your human experience. And now, because you're not taking away, right, you're sharing, Now, instead of you just having that one human experience, which was your own, now there exists an environment, right, where there's your human experience, their human experience, and the shared perspectives of the human experience that you now both have created in the form of that relationship. That's beautiful and that's powerful to me, right? All right. Few more moments. We're gonna wait and see if anybody else again wants to chime in with today's subject matter, or anything else that someone else may have commented on or raised for the forum to speak about. Okay, Ma V got a little something else for us. How does this topic relate to monogamy and other forms of unions? Now we done added a whole nother dimension. We done took it from linearity to a multi-dimensional aspect. True that. Yeah. Excellent, Marv. Make it complex. True that. So, first of all, we've got to acknowledge that anyone's choice or any group of individuals, whether we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, group of individuals who engages in a relationship, this is their sovereign choice to do so. Okay. Also, this is their opportunity to have that much more of a multifaceted shared experience. It's just numbers, right? But again, even just in a monogamous relationship between two people, two individuals, you have already created for yourself a multiplicity in your perspectives that are now available to you, as opposed to only the one perspective that you are developing in your human experience. But as that increases, obviously, with the number of individuals, you are surely adding on to the collage of perspectives. There are a lot of complexities that I think we all have to acknowledge come along with that. And I think that a lot of that is driven by maturity, by your spiritual maturity. Because the further you are along in that process, I think, just from my perspective, I think you will have developed that many more truly refined coping mechanisms to properly react to, or not properly, because there's not an improper way, to efficiently and effectively react to the myriad of situations and circumstances that you will be providing for each other in that relationship, whatever it may be. Right? So the complexity there is obviously increased. And the nuances that are created and opened up by that sort of a shared experience are very, first of all, much more varied, but are very very deep and very much inspiring of continuation of one's journey, right? So, I mean, and folks, listen, I feel like we have to come to a place where we're a little bit more complex these days in our um, our realm of where we're willing to go with what a relationship can be, right? Um, because of these complex and multifaceted and multidimensional days and times that we're living in, right? Um, I think that's gotten to the point that it's a must that we have to have that in order for us to have healthy opportunities within these relationships to foster one another's growth and continuation of our experience. And in uh, um, those parameters, right? Whatever parameters you set for your relationship, whether it's a monogamous relationship between two individuals, or whether it is a relationship taking some other form, perhaps with multiple individuals, or just if it's a non-traditional type of union, right? All of those things provide their own nuances that we really need to be prepared to steer through and grow from with spiritual maturity from the onset, right? And what I was starting to allude to is that we don't, there are complex things that we wouldn't even 15 or 20 years ago even invited as potentials into the relationship, like soul contracts, for example. How on the other side of the veil, we make agreements with one another that, hey, when we come into this next lifetime, we're going to meet up around this certain time and we all going to share in this kind of a union, right? You might have made that soul agreement on the other side of the veil and be living it out. And that may be a very key part of your experience in corporeal life, right? Whatever the reason may be. Now, maybe I picked an extreme set of circumstances, but that is certainly viable. But whatever your reason for whatever kind of relationship you are in, certainly coming from a healthy place of your own completeness, right? And I think probably in the more complex relationship forms or forms of unions, um, your own personal completeness may be that much more paramount and of a necessity. It always is, but um, you're just dealing with that much more of a complex situation or scenario, providing those many more nuances for you to have to steer through maturely from a spiritually mature place. But also, when you're able to, and you have that capacity to truly appreciate the other individual or individuals' human experience in the relationship, that when you do that, um, you're able to do so from a very complete and healthy place, so that that relationship, whatever the form is, right, is set up to be healthy and to bring healthy outcomes, right? Okay, that was dope. Okay, Ma V offers something else up for us. Do you all believe monogamy resides within an ideology of ownership? Okay. Um, it can, right? I think that I'll just speak for myself, and please, anybody else, chime in, man. I want to hear what y'all think. um, but yeah, it most certainly can. Um, I've in my 50 years seen that so many times, right? Where just the way I'll frame it this way: the way that monogamy is presented to us in this Western society particularly in the United States, yes, I think it's very much almost invited the ownership mentality. I do think that, um, which only goes along with the thought that I have that we very much need to reform um, how society frames our relationships. And we need to get out of that zone that they have created for us. And when I say they, I'm always referring to the socially economic elite. Most of you know that about me, right? Don't hate them, love them as well, but y'all need to get your act together, and we fit to make that happen. All right, but yeah, we very much have to acknowledge that the way monogamy is presented to us and the layers and layers of indoctrination that we have experienced through our lives, certainly, if it doesn't outright foster it, it provides many pathways to ownership mentality and even ownership mentality potentially taken to the extremes. Very much so, Mavi. Good point. And she has another. Oh, okay. Is this like a? Oh, cool. This is Issa's comment in response to what Mavi was saying. First time we had one of those. Let's keep that coming. We need that interaction. I applaud that real quick. Okay. I believe the concept of monogamy is not, and in fact, means to strengthen the foundation you're building with one another. Word life. Okay. So she says, I believe the concept of monogamy is not necessarily inherently aligned with ownership. Isha, I know I'm paraphrasing you a little bit. I think that's what you mean. If I'm misstating you, please correct me. But she believes that the concept of monogamy is not necessarily aligned with inherently with ownership, and vice versa. And in fact, means to strengthen the foundation, can be a means to strengthen the foundation you're building with one another. Sure, when you have that monogamy and trust within that, right, in the fidelity of that. Yeah, I think that is very much powerful and important. That's and social engineering has got a lot to do with that. I talked and have talked myself on several videos about my own shortcomings and how social engineering breeds within men quite often, especially in the quote unquote Black community, this conquesting mentality that leads to infidelity innately, right? In developing of your manhood, or what is engineered to be your concept of manhood, right? So yeah, that's interesting. I don't think, again, that you must necessarily have a strong concept, or that there will necessarily be an alignment of the ownership mentality with the concept or relationship structure of monogamy. But I think as it is presented, again, I led earlier with this caveat that as it is presented by sort of this machine of social engineering that we have in this country in particular, that it does provide a lot of inroads for that. That's my perspective, but that's a very um, uh, important and very valid perspective on Mom V's comment and sort of open question that she posed for everyone that Isha just now presented. Thank you for that, Isha. Looks like she has an additional comment. Okay. Isha goes on to say, in action, it can be, and oftentimes it is, because it's weaponized for the use of control and slash ownership. Yeah, true that. Um, Again, I think it's symptomatic of sort of the result, or the results, or the outcomes of uh, social engineering upon what we have sort of morphed monogamous relationships into, the way they're presented to us, and the way we have responded from all these layers of indoctrination to grow these concepts, right? I think that ownership really has been often weaponized by either one party in the relationship against the other, or both parties against one another in monogamous relationships. I think that has very much been an issue and a big problem that has arisen, that certainly we need to address moving forward with more healthy and productive relationships. Excellent point, Isha. Thank you for that. Okay, Mavi chimes in again with, yes, Isha. I believe all relationships have been weaponized. Yes, Sadiq, word life. Thank you for the affirmation, sis. Um, you know, I'm pausing because what comes in my mind is a picture, okay? Um, or sort of a scene, right? A liquid scene in my mind that plays this very tranquil and sort of ideal, um, that we can borrow from the indigenous around the world. People on this planet who live what many would term as a far more simplistic life, many even judgmentally or harshly would term as a not archaic, but a primitive life, which I think is a very judgmental way of viewing the lifestyles of indigenous people around the planet. But one of the things that I believe is likely, because I live in um, this environment, but what I believe is likely one of the beneficial products of their lifestyles is that the relationships are likely far more pure, because they don't have all the poisoning effects of social engineering, right? That would take the form of weaponizing in relationships, right? They're absent that. I think that is a very real thing in our society, and the deterioration of relationships, I believe, is a result of that, is a direct outcome of that. Um, that unfortunately we have seen in our society. And I brought that up because perhaps that's a way that we can counteract this weaponizing within relationships of the ownership mentality, right? Um, by removing some of these layers of indoctrination once we recognize them as being applicable to what compounds our need to have this ownership mentality, and all of the problems that tend to result from that when it spins out of control, or if it's actually weaponized, right? Again, one person against the other or both against one another. Either way, all of the individuals who would succumb to that, I believe, are being directly affected by social engineering that promotes that, right? Um, you know, it is not in the purview or the agenda of the socially economic elite for us to have healthy and productive relationships. Folks, to me, and I'm getting back on my typical soapbox a little bit, but to me, we so much are at the point where we have got to realize that there is an actual segment of humanity that wants to do away with most of us. That the populationist movement is a real thing, and the different branches of it and how it presents itself, like eugenics and elitism, et cetera, right? The point is, there are people who are very powerful and in very influential places who have the ability to put constructs in place that impact every institution that makes up our everyday lives and that impacts our relationships. So these layers of indoctrination that these people have put in place that impact and shape our relationships don't have your best interest in mind, right? So we need to counteract and remove as much of that crap as we can as we identify it, right? And as we are introspective, um, we can be not only introspective in relations in our individuality, but within relationships, we can be introspective and we can start to find the effects of those layers of indoctrination and how and what we need to remove from our relationship so that we're not weaponizing that ownership mentality against one another in any way. All right. Mavi goes on further. So we must begin with a critical awareness of the ways in which we're being or have been socially engineered to not recognize ourselves within these systems of hierarchy. Yes, exactly what I'm saying, right? Um, they have so shrewdly layered these sets of indoctrination into the what I refer to as the old paradigm, and interwoven them in the form of control systems, right? Within every single institution that affects our everyday lives, education, religion, finance, agriculture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The institution of marriage and or relationships and unions and how that looks and that whole forum, right? Um, and these things really have a profound impact on what our relationships look like, because we're constantly filtering out, or unbeknownst to us many times filtering in, these different layers, or the impacts of these layers of indoctrination. Mavi states, I absolutely agree, bro. Thank you, sis. True that. But with again, because I never want us to leave off in a place where we just like see the problem and be like in a dark, down place about it. I see already, just by us having this conversation and other conversations like it that are being had, an opportunity for us to grow. And that we're starting that growth process by recognizing all this stuff so that we can remove it, right? And as we do that, we will become that much more healthy and that much more successful and efficient in our relationships, right? Meaning that our daily lives will be far less rocky, I feel like. So yeah, the platform for growth is there. We can solve this by continuing to do what we're doing. Let's bust it up a little bit. Let's build. Come and build with Big King and continue to build with one another every time you got an opportunity, and talk about things like this so that we can remove the layers of indoctrination that have affected us so deeply and put us in this box, or in these boxes, or parameters of constraint and limit that we have put on one another, in response to, or as a symptom, or as symptomology of the old paradigm and the agenda upheld by the socially economic elite, who have instilled this social engineering and all its layers of indoctrination upon us. Mavi comes in and comments again with, our identity or identification will be more transformative and useful when it isn't centered in exclusion and hierarchy. True that. True that. They only promote exclusion and hierarchy in the agenda of the old paradigm set forth by the socially economic elite, because it is that fosters separation mentality, right? And anyone who read my first book, I talk a lot about separation mentality versus unity consciousness. And a lot of people I recognize even sort of confuse unity consciousness a bit. Like, I don't mean everyone needs to think the same thing at the same time in order to be on the same page, right? We still need to have individuality. In fact, individuality needs to be highlighted. What we need in unity consciousness, and what unity consciousness provides us, is the understanding and the innate core belief that everything we do affects the collective, and everything that the collective becomes affects us. We are connected, is what we need to understand. That is a part of our reality that is very much skewed and mutated even by separation mentality, right? So we need to come out of being centered in exclusion and hierarchy in order to not continue to foster that mentality of separation that keeps us from growing in all the ways that we can grow and benefit from healthy, productive, and efficient relationships. All right, word life. Man, look what we've gotten to. We've been in this thing almost an hour and 40 minutes. And man, like I said, this has become a powerful forum already, folks, right? For anybody who views it. And by the way, this, of course, is going to be recorded and viewable on my YouTube channel in the future, not only for anybody who wants to go back and revisit this wonderful conversation, but for anybody else who just wants to chime in later on. And let me tell you, I feel like this has been a powerful conversation that that can really be helpful to a lot of people. So again, thank you so much, Mavi, Isha, uh, um, um, Brother Maine, Brother Ty, um, um, Heather, Stu, um, everybody who has chimed in, right, and had some comments, questions, statements, or something that they would pose and leave open for the forum. Thank you, because because of y'all, we've had a fantastic conversation, and again, I couldn't be more pleased, possibly, with already what this form is growing into. This is powerful. This is a very powerful beginning. So I only see good and great things growing moving forward. Um, Heather states that you are welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, thank you so much, man. All of y'all, truly. Uh, I love you and I appreciate you and I honor you and salute you all. Right? Um, so I'm gonna wrap things up on another fantastic episode next week. We're going to, of course, have another powerful episode. I hope to have this rousing of a conversation and this robust of a great conversation with so much interaction and us sharing and growing off of one another. Right, that's what it's all about. So yeah, I can only hope for this again next week. We're going to continue to keep it at 7 p.m. for now. That seems to be a much more accessible time for most folks on a Saturday. So please, I invite you all to come back next week at 7 p.m. Please do. I truly hope to see you. You really have given us so much today, and I can only hope for just as much next week. So I love you all. Once again, as always, thank you for helping me continue to build the worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Thank you all for chiming in and coming to build with Big King. And I look forward to seeing you all next week and next week's episode. Thank you. Worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq. I'm out.